The photograph was found in a shoebox beneath the floorboards of a Pennsylvania farmhouse in 1998. The house had been abandoned for 30 years. When the new owners tore up the rotting wood in the attic, they found more than termite damage. They found 43 black and white photographs, each one marked with dates ranging from April to October of 1947. The Pritchard family. 6 members. A mother, a father, 2 daughters, and 2 sons. Smiling in some, solemn in others, but in every single frame, standing just behind them or to the side, partially obscured by shadow or distance, was a 7th figure. Tall, featureless, always watching. The family never acknowledged it, not in their expressions, not in their body language. It was as if they couldn't see it, or had learned not to. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. The Pritchard family lived on a 160-acre farm outside the town of Winfield, Pennsylvania. Population 812. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, your debts, and your sins. Arthur Pritchard was a veteran. He'd come home from the Pacific Theater in 1945 with a silver star and a limp he never explained. His wife, Eleanor, taught Sunday school at the Baptist church. Their children were well-behaved, quiet, the kind of quiet that made neighbors nervous. In the spring of 1947, Arthur bought a Kodak Brownie camera from a traveling salesman. He told his wife he wanted to document their lives, to capture the moments that mattered. By October, the camera had been thrown into the well behind the house. The family stopped attending church, and by December, they were gone. The house stood empty. No one bought it. No one even tried. The town records listed the property as abandoned in 1949. The Pritchards were never seen again, not in Winfield, not anywhere. But those photographs remained, hidden, waiting. And when you look at them closely, really closely, you begin to see what the Pritchards couldn't, or wouldn't. The figure wasn't just standing there. It was getting closer, frame by frame, month by month, until in the final photograph, taken on October 18, 1947, it was standing directly behind Arthur Pritchard's shoulder, close enough to touch. Arthur Pritchard came home from the war different. That's what the neighbors said. That's what his brother told the county clerk when he filed the missing persons report in January of 1948. Different didn't mean angry. Different didn't mean violent. Different meant silent. Arthur had always been a talker, the kind of man who'd lean on a fence post and discuss crop rotation for an hour. The kind who'd slap your back and buy you a drink at the Elks Lodge on Friday nights. But after Okinawa, after whatever he saw in those final months of the Pacific Campaign, Arthur stopped talking about anything that mattered. He worked the farm, he ate dinner, he read the paper, and at night, according to Eleanor's sister, he would sit in the darkened living room with the lights off, staring at the window. Not out the window, at it, as if he were watching his own reflection, or something behind it. The camera arrived in April, a Tuesday. The salesman's name was recorded in Arthur's ledger as Mr. H. Carmichael, though no one in Winfield remembered seeing him. Arthur paid $12.50. He told Eleanor the camera would be good for the children, something to remember their childhood by. She thought it was a strange thing to say. The children were still young. Margaret was 10, Thomas was 8, the twins, Ruth and Samuel, were only 6. There was plenty of childhood left, but Eleanor didn't argue. You didn't argue with Arthur anymore, not since he came home. The first photograph was taken on April 6, 1947, a Sunday. The whole family stood in front of the barn. Arthur set the camera on a fence post and used the self-timer. Everyone smiled, everyone looked at the lens, and in the background, just visible through the gap between the barn doors, was a shadow, vertical, taller than a man should be. Eleanor saw it when the photograph was developed. She asked Arthur if someone had been in the barn that day. He said no. He said it was just a trick of the light. But when she looked at him, his hands were shaking. He burned that first photograph in the stove. She watched him do it. But he kept taking pictures. By May, there were 12 more. Family dinners, the children playing in the yard, Eleanor hanging laundry, and in every single one, the figure appeared, sometimes distant, a shape at the edge of the tree line, sometimes closer, standing behind the chicken coop. Once, in a photograph taken on May 23rd, it was visible through the kitchen window, just a silhouette, but Eleanor could see it was looking in. She stopped asking Arthur about it, because by then she'd started seeing it too, not in the photographs, in the house. A flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. The sense of someone standing just behind her when she was alone. The feeling that when she turned around, something had just stepped out of sight. The children never said a word, but Margaret stopped sleeping in her room. She'd crawl into bed with Ruth, and the two of them would huddle together under the blankets, whispering prayers their mother had taught them. Thomas started wetting the bed. Samuel stopped speaking entirely for 2 weeks in June. The doctor said it was a phase. Eleanor knew better. By July, Arthur had taken 29 photographs. He kept them in a leather portfolio in his desk drawer. Eleanor found them one afternoon while he was out in the fields. She spread them across the kitchen table in chronological order: April, May, June, July. And as she looked at them, one after another, she realized what she was seeing. The figure was moving, not between locations, toward them. In the April photographs, it was distant, 100 yards away, maybe more. A dark shape that could have been a tree or a post or a man in a long coat. By May, it was 50 yards, close enough that you could see it had a human shape, shoulders, a head, arms that hung too long. By June, it was standing at the edge of their property, just beyond the fence line, always facing the house, always still. And in the July photographs, it was in the yard, behind the woodshed, next to the well, standing in the garden while Eleanor picked tomatoes, visible just over her shoulder, less than 10 feet away. She confronted Arthur that night. She laid the photographs on the table in front of him and demanded to know what was happening, who was following them, why he kept taking pictures of it. Arthur didn't look at the photographs. He looked at his hands. He told her it had followed him home. He said it had been with him since Okinawa, since the cave. He didn't explain what cave. He didn't explain what happened there. He only said that he'd made a mistake, that he'd taken something that wasn't his, and now it wanted it back. Eleanor asked what he had taken. Arthur stood up from the table. He walked to the window and stared out at the dark fields. He said he didn't take an object. He took a life. The wrong life. And now it wouldn't leave. It wouldn't forgive. It would follow him until he gave it what it was owed. Eleanor asked what it was owed. Arthur said everything. The next morning, Eleanor went to Reverend Michael's at the Baptist church. She brought 3 of the photographs. She didn't tell him about Arthur's confession. She only said that something was wrong, that her family was being watched, that she needed help. Reverend Michaels looked at the photographs for a long time. He was a practical man, a man who believed in God but also in medicine, in rational explanations, in the comfort of scripture over superstition. But when he looked at those photographs, his face went pale. He asked Eleanor if she had been experiencing any disturbances in the home, noises, cold spots, the feeling of being watched. She said yes, all of it. He asked if Arthur had been different since the war. She said yes. The Reverend closed the photographs and handed them back. He told her there were things the church could do, blessings, prayers, but he said it carefully, as if he didn't believe they would work. He told her that sometimes, when men come back from war, they bring things with them, not in their packs, in their souls, guilt, rage, grief, and sometimes those things take shape. He said it gently, but Eleanor understood what he meant. He thought Arthur was haunted, and he thought the haunting was inside him. She never went back to church. None of them did. Because the Reverend was wrong. It wasn't inside Arthur. It was with them, and it was getting closer. August was when the children started drawing it. Margaret first. She'd always been the artistic one. She'd sketch flowers and horses and the barn cat in her notebook during the slow hours of summer. But in early August, Eleanor found a drawing tucked under Margaret's pillow. It was crude, done in pencil, but unmistakable. A tall figure, no face, long arms, standing in a doorway. Eleanor asked her daughter why she'd drawn it. Margaret looked at her mother with eyes that seemed far older than 10 years. She said she drew it so she'd remember what it looked like, in case it changed. Eleanor didn't understand, Margaret said it was different every time she saw it. Sometimes it looked like a man, sometimes it didn't have a shape at all, just a feeling, a coldness. She said she wanted to draw it while it still looked like something. Before it became nothing, Thomas drew it too. So did Ruth. Samuel couldn't draw, but he arranged his wooden blocks into the shape of it on the floor of his room. A tall stack, thin, unbalanced. When Eleanor knocked it over, Samuel screamed. He screamed until his voice gave out. Arthur had to hold him down. The boy thrashed and clawed and bit. And when he finally stopped, he whispered something Eleanor would never forget. He said it was angry now. He said they shouldn't have touched it. Arthur asked what he meant. Samuel said the blocks weren't the shape of it. The blocks were it. And now it was inside the house. The photographs from August showed exactly that. On August 2nd, the figure was standing on the porch, visible through the screen door in a picture Arthur took of Eleanor and the children at the dinner table. On August 9th, it was in the hallway, a dark shape in the background while the family posed in the living room. On August 16th, it was in the children's bedroom. Standing between the twins' beds, Ruth and Samuel were asleep in the photograph, or they appeared to be. But if you looked closely, you could see their eyes were open. They were staring at the ceiling. On August 23rd, the figure was standing directly behind Eleanor. She was sitting in a chair, sewing. Arthur had taken the photograph from across the room. The figure was so close to her that its shadow covered half her body. She said later she'd felt cold that day, a chill that wouldn't leave. She thought she was getting sick. By the end of August, Arthur stopped going into the fields. He stayed in the house. He nailed the windows shut. He told Eleanor it was to keep the heat in, though it was still summer and the nights were warm. He kept the brownie camera on the kitchen table. He took photographs every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Eleanor asked him why he kept doing it. If the thing was already in the house, what was the point of documenting it? Arthur said he needed proof. Proof of what? She asked. Proof that he wasn't insane. Proof that it was real. Proof that when it finally took them, someone would know why. Eleanor asked if he thought it was going to take them. Arthur didn't answer. But that night, he moved all 4 children into the master bedroom. He and Eleanor slept on the floor. The children slept in the bed, and Arthur kept the camera next to him, within arm's reach. He said if he heard anything, he was going to take a picture. Eleanor asked what he expected to see. Arthur said he expected to see it smile. September brought the silence, not the absence of sound, something heavier, a pressure in the air that made speaking feel like effort. The children stopped playing. They sat in the living room together, close enough to touch, and stared at nothing. Eleanor would call their names and they'd turn their heads slowly, as if waking from sleep. Arthur stopped eating. He'd sit at the table with a plate in front of him and move the food around with his fork, but nothing went to his mouth. He lost weight. His clothes hung loose. His eyes sank deep into his skull. Eleanor asked him if he was trying to starve himself. He said he wasn't hungry anymore. He said food tasted like ash, like the inside of the cave. She didn't ask which cave. She already knew. The photographs from September were different. The figure was no longer in the background. It was centered, dominant. In a photograph taken on September 7th, it stood in the middle of the living room while the family sat on the couch. They were all looking at it, not at the camera. At it. Their faces were blank, expressionless, as if they were waiting for instruction. In a photograph from September 14th, it was sitting at the dinner table, in Arthur's chair. Arthur stood behind it, his hand on its shoulder, or where a shoulder would be. The shape was less defined now, more shadow than form. You could see through it in places, but it was there, solid enough to cast its own darkness. On September 21st, Eleanor was holding it, or it was holding her. The photograph showed her standing in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around something that looked like a child, but it was too tall to be a child, and its head was wrong, elongated, featureless. When Eleanor saw that photograph, she vomited. She said she didn't remember taking that picture. She didn't remember holding anything. Arthur's brother came to visit on September 28th. He'd heard from neighbors that the family hadn't been seen in town for over a month, that the children hadn't been to school, that no one had attended church. He drove out to the farm and knocked on the door for 10 minutes before Arthur answered. Arthur stood in the doorway and didn't invite him in. His brother said later that Arthur looked like a corpse. Grey skin, hollow eyes. He asked if everything was all right. Arthur said everything was fine. His brother asked to see Eleanor and the children. Arthur said they were resting. His brother pushed past him and walked into the house. He found the family in the living room, all 6 of them sitting in a row on the couch, staring at the wall. He called their names. None of them responded. He grabbed Margaret by the shoulders and shook her. She turned her head and looked at him, and he said her eyes were black. Not the pupils, the entire eye, black from edge to edge. He stumbled backward. He asked Arthur what the hell was happening. Arthur closed the front door. He locked it. He said they were being prepared. His brother asked prepared for what? Arthur picked up the camera. He said they were being taken home. And then he took a photograph. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? Arthur's brother broke a window and climbed out. He drove straight to the sheriff's office. He told them the Pritchard family was in danger, that something was wrong, that Arthur had lost his mind. The sheriff and 2 deputies drove out to the farm that evening. They found the doors locked, the windows covered from the inside. They knocked. They announced themselves. No one answered. They broke down the door. The house was empty. Not empty of people, empty of everything. Furniture, photographs, clothes, food. It was as if no one had ever lived there. The walls were bare. The floors were clean. In the living room, on the mantel above the fireplace, was the Browdy camera. And inside it, one final photograph. Undeveloped, waiting. The sheriff took the camera back to town. He had the photograph developed at Booker's drugstore, the only place in Winfield with a dark room. Mr. Booker was 63 years old. He'd developed thousands of photographs in his career. Weddings, funerals, school portraits. He said later that when he pulled that negative from the chemical bath, his hands went numb. He said he almost dropped it. The photograph showed the Pritchard family, all 6 of them, standing in the living room in a line, facing the camera. But they weren't alone. Behind them, surrounding them, were 7 figures, tall, identical, featureless. The family's faces were turned upward, their mouths open, their eyes black. And in the center of the photograph, standing directly in front of Arthur, was the original figure, the one that had been following them since April. But now, you could see it clearly. It had Arthur's face, or what was left of it. A hollow impression. A mask of skin stretched over something that wasn't human. Mr. Booker sealed the photograph in an envelope and gave it to the sheriff. He told him to burn it. The sheriff didn't. He filed it as evidence. Case number 47-183, missing persons, presumed dead. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Volunteers searched the property, the fields, the woods, the well. They found nothing. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle. The house was examined by a doctor from Harrisburg who specialized in toxicology. He tested the walls for gas leaks, the water for contamination. Everything came back normal. A psychiatrist was brought in to evaluate Arthur's brother. He was found to be of sound mind, traumatized, but lucid. He stuck to his story. The family had been there. They'd been sitting on the couch. Margaret's eyes had been black, and Arthur had said they were being taken home. The psychiatrist asked what he thought Arthur meant by home. Arthur's brother said he didn't think Arthur was talking about Pennsylvania. The case was closed in late October. The official report stated that the Pritchard family had likely fled the property due to financial strain and mental duress brought on by Arthur's war trauma. It suggested they'd relocated under assumed names. It recommended the case remain open but inactive. No further investigation was conducted. The house was seized by the county for unpaid taxes in 1949. It sat empty for nearly 50 years. But the photographs weren't the only thing left behind. In November of 1947, 3 families in Winfield reported seeing a tall figure standing in their yards at night, always facing the house, always still. In December, a schoolteacher named Violet Cruz disappeared from her home. Her door was found open, her bed unmade. On her kitchen table was a single photograph. It showed Violet sitting in her living room, and standing behind her, close enough to touch, was the figure. The photograph had been taken with a Brownie camera, the same model Arthur had owned. The sheriff traced the purchase to a traveling salesman named H. Carmichael, but no record of Carmichael existed, no business license, no address, no social security number. It was as if he'd never been real, or as if he'd only been real enough to sell cameras. By 1948, Winfield had lost 11 residents. All disappeared without a trace. All had been visited by the figure. All had taken photographs. The town council held an emergency meeting. They discussed relocating, burning the Pritchard house, bringing in the state police. But they did nothing, because no one wanted to admit what was happening. No one wanted to say it out loud, that something had come home with Arthur Pritchard, something that didn't just haunt. It recruited, it spread, it reproduced, and the only way it could move from one person to the next was through sight, through recognition, through the act of capturing its image and making it real. The photographs weren't evidence, they were invitations, and once you looked, once you really saw it, it saw you back. The Pritchard farmhouse burned in 1951. No one admitted to starting the fire. The county ruled it accidental, lightning strike. But there hadn't been a storm that night. The sky had been clear. By morning, there was nothing left but the foundation and the stone chimney. The well was filled with concrete. The land was sold to a developer from Philadelphia who had never heard of the Pritchards. He built nothing on it. The property changed hands 6 more times over the next 40 years. No one ever built. No one ever stayed. In 1998, when the new owners tore up the attic floor, they found the shoebox, 43 photographs, sealed in wax paper, preserved perfectly. They posted about the find on an internet forum for antique collectors. They scanned 3 of the images. Within a week, the thread had been deleted. The forum administrators claimed it violated community guidelines. But users who'd seen the photographs reported the same thing. They'd started seeing the figure in their homes, in reflections, standing just outside their peripheral vision. 2 users disappeared. Their accounts went silent. Their families filed missing persons reports. Nothing was ever found. The photographs were donated to the Pennsylvania State Archives in 1999. They were catalogued under restricted access. Researchers who requested to view them had to sign a waiver. Of the 12 people who examined the photographs between 1999 and 2015, 4 reported psychological distress, nightmares, paranoia, the sensation of being watched. One researcher, a historian named Dr. Marion Fells, wrote in her notes that the figure in the photographs appeared to change depending on who was looking at it. She said that in some frames, it looked human. In others, it looked like a void, a gap in reality shaped like a person. She requested a second viewing. Her request was denied. 3 weeks later, she was found in her apartment. The door was locked from the inside. She was sitting in a chair facing the window. Her eyes were open. The coroner ruled it a heart attack, but her colleague said that when they found her, there was a photograph on her lap, a Polaroid. It showed Marion sitting in that same chair, and standing behind her, with its hand on her shoulder, was the figure. The photographs were sealed in 2016. The official reason given was preservation concerns, deterioration of the original negatives. But the archivist who made the decision said later, off the record, that it wasn't about preservation. It was about containment. She said the photographs had a quality she couldn't explain. A weight. She said that every time someone looked at them, something looked back, and she wasn't willing to be responsible for what happened next. The Pritchard case file remains open, technically, but no one has touched it in years. The farmhouse land is still empty. The town of Winfield still exists, though its population has dwindled to fewer than 300. People leave. They don't talk about why, and if you ask the older residents about the Pritchards, they'll tell you they don't remember, but they do. You can see it in their faces. The way they glance over their shoulder, the way they avoid mirrors after dark. Arthur Pritchard made a mistake in a cave on Okinawa in 1945. He took a life, the wrong life, and something followed him home. It didn't want revenge. It wanted continuation. It wanted to be seen, to be recognized, to be real, and the camera gave it that. Every photograph was a doorway. Every image was an anchor. And once it was captured, once it was made visible, it could move. From the film to the viewer, from the viewer to the world. The Pritchards didn't die, they were taken, pulled into the space between what is and what watches. And they're still there, standing just behind you in every photograph you'll never see, waiting for you to look, waiting for you to recognize them, because that's how it spreads. Not through blood, not through proximity, through sight, through acknowledgement, through the moment you realize that the shadow in the corner of your vision isn't a shadow at all. It's someone standing there, someone who's been there all along, someone who followed you home. And now that you've seen it, now that you know it's real, it will never leave. It will stand behind you in every mirror, every window, every photograph, getting closer, frame by frame, until one day, you'll be the one standing in the background of someone else's picture. Tall, featureless, always watching, and the cycle will begin again. The photographs are still in the Pennsylvania State Archives, sealed, restricted, waiting. If you know where to look, you can request them. You can sign the waiver. You can see what the Pritchards saw. But ask yourself first, are you sure you want to know what's standing behind you? Are you sure you want it? To know that you can see it. Because once you look, once you really look, you can never look away. And it will follow you home, just like it followed Arthur. Just like it's following everyone who's ever seen it. The question isn't whether it's real. The question is whether you're brave enough to find out. And if you are, if you really are, then go ahead. Look at the photographs, stare into the shadows, and see what stares back. But don't say you weren't warned. Don't say no one told you. Because now you know. And knowing is the first step. The last step is when you see it standing behind you. And by then, it's already too late.